On my first day in a new role at a giant multinational global conglomerate, I heard the plan. Rebuild a massive legacy web app as a native iOS app with full feature parity in just 1 year. And my first thought, there is no way. And what followed was a mess of handoffs, delays, and missed deadlines, a classic case of the planning fallacy. It's our tendency to underestimate how long things will actually take. And this week, we're breaking down why it happens, how it derails teams, and what we can do about it. What's up, UX fam? Welcome to another edition of the Cognition Catalog, where every week or so, we'll dig into a new cognitive bias and explore how that bias can impact how our team works together and what we can do to ensure we don't get caught up in the pitfalls. Because working with people is hard, and the more insights we have into the human condition make it just a little bit easier. To learn more about the planning fallacy, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com. Sign up for the newsletter to get a new bias in your inbox every week, and make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to worry about falling for any of these biases again. And if you think you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That would help me out so much. Shout out to this week's sponsor, Mobbin. If you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, then Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, and Zoe for their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, even episodes before they're released. For more information on how you can support the show and help more people find out about what we're doing, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/support. So several years back, after I finally left advertising, I joined a giant global conglomerate enterprise company. I joined the team about a month or two into a massive software project. The initiative sounded bold, and it was. Take an old legacy web application used by engineers out in the field and rebuild it as a native iOS app with complete one-to-one feature parity. But here's the kicker. It was all supposed to be finished in exactly 1 year. And on my very first day, when somebody explained the plan, my immediate thought was, there is absolutely no way in hell this is going to happen. You guys are crazy. Now, to meet the deadlines, the team had implemented a follow-the-sun engineering model, and that's where teams in the US, Europe, and India are passing code back and forth all around the clock. Now, on paper, it looked like a clever way to speed things up, but in practice, it created absolute chaos. Engineers were constantly inheriting half-finished user stories, spending just as much time cleaning up handoffs as they were writing new code, and instead of improving efficiency, it just magnified the complexity and generally just made it all a giant mess. Now, the project ultimately failed to hit its 1-year deadline, no surprise, and it took almost another full year before the app finally shipped. And even then, the scope had been dramatically cut, and feature parity with the old tool didn't actually happen for almost another year. Now, as a UX designer in this giant multinational conglomerate, I found that this dynamic played out all the time the same way across many big projects that I was on. Leadership would set aggressive timelines, usually because of some shareholder or stock market pressure. The middle managers would just often nod along, partly out of optimism, but partly out of pressure to do what leadership said. And the people on the ground thought it was nuts, almost every time. And almost inevitably, deadlines slipped. Now, the planning fallacy wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a recurring pattern embedded in the culture. So what's the planning fallacy? Well, let's dig into it. We tend to underestimate the time, effort, and resources required to complete tasks, even when we have past experience suggesting otherwise. This bias leads us to be overly optimistic about timelines and project outcomes, often ignoring past evidence of delays and complications. The planning fallacy was first introduced by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky in 1979, two of the greats. Their research revealed a consistent human tendency when predicting the duration of future tasks. Individuals often imagine a best-case scenario rather than relying on realistic averages from prior experience. Even experts and professionals who have managed similar projects, they all tend to fall into this exact same trap, and this demonstrates how deeply ingrained this bias is. Now, one of the most well-known case studies of this bias is the Sydney Opera House project. Originally estimated to take about 4 years and cost about $7 million Australian dollars, the project ballooned into a 14-year construction project costing more than 100 million Australian dollars. Now, despite clear evidence of delays and rising costs, decision makers repeatedly relied on overly optimistic projections. This famous example highlights how optimism, group pressure, and political motivations can collectively reinforce the planning fallacy on a large scale. Now, more studies have shown that we don't fall for the planning fallacy simply because we're overly optimistic. We often fall for planning fallacy because we don't consider outside views. Now, Kahneman later stressed the importance of what he called reference class forecasting, which means comparing current projects to historical data from similar reference classes. And yet, even with an awareness of the planning fallacy, we tend to continue to fall for it, and that's often because focusing on potential setbacks feels discouraging or less motivating, and who wants to be a gloomy Gus? Now, for teams, the planning fallacy can have serious consequences. At a leadership level, the planning fallacy can warp strategic decision-making. Executives may greenlight initiatives with aggressive schedules to please the board or investors, still knowing deep down that the estimates are entirely unrealistic. And over time, this erodes morale with teams who end up seeing leadership and their timelines as completely detached from reality. It kills morale. Product teams may agree to leadership's unrealistic goals, thinking that it's possible. Engineers may underestimate complexity. Designers may believe that they can finish more research and design more iterations than time actually allows for. These overly optimistic estimates not only create stress and burnout, but they can also damage credibility with important stakeholders and customers when those deadlines are missed. Now, for agile teams, the planning fallacy often shows up in sprint planning. Teams may load their backlog with more work than they can realistically accomplish in a sprint because they're under pressure to show progress and all those metrics and burn down charts and everything else they have to worry about. While the intention is positive, we think it demonstrates ambition and efficiency. The result is often incomplete tasks, stories rolling over to the next sprint, and growing frustration from the people up above us. Now, this ultimately undermines trust in the planning process itself. The bias also affects cross-functional collaboration. For example, engineers might promise delivery based on their portion of the work, forgetting to account for QA, acceptance testing, or unforeseen integration and deployment hurdles. Marketing teams might plan product launches without considering the inevitable technical delays. When each function underestimates in isolation, the collective outcome becomes even more unrealistic. Well, what can you do about it? Well, here are a few things I think you can try. First, acknowledge our bias for optimism. Recognize that our natural tendency is to imagine best-case scenarios. Naming tendencies like this can often help us to identify those biases more easily, and that can help you take this fallacy into account during planning and make room for more realistic timelines. Next, adopt an outside view. Instead of relying on internal estimates, if you have access to this data, compare projects against similar past initiatives from other teams. Historical data can give us a more accurate baseline, and it reduces our reliance on that gut-level optimism, which is often wrong. Next, add buffers intentionally. Build contingency time and resources into project plans. Don't think of buffers as a sign of weakness. Think of them as safeguards against the unexpected, which is always more common than we like to admit. Back when I was doing consulting, we used to say, double it and then add 50%. Try something like that. Next, make estimation collaborative. Encourage cross-functional input when creating estimates. When we include voices from the rest of the team, it helps reduce those blind spots and creates more holistic forecasts. And then lastly, track and learn from the outcomes. Regularly compare actual delivery times against your initial estimates. Reviewing those mismatches can help us spot recurring patterns and improve our forecasting accuracy over time. Well, all right, y'all, that's it for the Cognition Catalog for today. I hope I helped to shed a little bit of light on the planning fallacy and how we can avoid some of those pitfalls at home and at work. But I'm curious, have you run into any of those issues related to the planning fallacy before? How'd you get through it? I'd love to hear about it. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. To learn more about the planning fallacy, you can find more resources at cognitioncatalog.com. Sign up for the newsletter to get a new bias in your inbox every week, and make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you never have to worry about falling for any of these biases again. And if you think you're getting something out of the show, I would love it if you left a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you know. And if you want to pick up some big, beautiful art prints and some select biases, make sure to check out beyonduxdesign.com/shop. Get free shipping on all orders over $30 and use the promo code LISTENER to get 10% off your entire order. And if you have a favorite bias that you want to see in print, let me know. I'd be happy to take requests. If you're tired of staring at a blank Figma canvas, Mobbin gives you access to over 400,000 beautifully designed UI screens and user flows with a library that grows bigger every week. Kickstart your creativity, streamline your workflow, and level up your design process. Visit mobbin.com/beyondux to get 20% off Mobbin Pro and never run out of inspiration again. Help keep the show independent and ad-free. Check out beyonduxdesign.com/support to find out how. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, Kevin, Jason, Michelle, Marty, Tino, Adina, Zoe, and many others and help keep the show independent and ad-free. You'll get exclusive access to the entire video library of episodes, including episodes before they're even released. Get instant access to those videos right now for as little as $5 a month. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX and design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all.